In the past 15 days, Donald Trump has signed 6 treaties, agreements with 6 different countries to consolidate America's access to rare earth elements and important magnets, which are critical for defense and emerging technologies. In Kuala Lumpur, he signed deals with 4 different countries, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand. And then he signed a deal with Japan, and he also signed one with Australia. So it appears that China's threat of weaponizing rare earth elements has triggered the US to essentially try and reduce China's dominance in the field. I'm amazed at the speed with which the US has responded, much, much faster than other players in the field like Japan, India, and the European Union. Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtadar Khan, your host. And today I'm going to talk to you about one of the most important and hot topics of global geopolitics, which is China's monopoly on rare earth elements and metals and magnets. China has used this as a counter lever to Donald Trump's use of tariffs. And as you can see, among all countries in the world, the only country that has to some extent resisted the United States imposing its will on the rest of the world using tariffs is China. Canada too has opposed, but Canada has a backdoor, which means that the United States is continuing to respect the US-Canada-Mexico Treaty, or NAFTA 2.0. As a result of that, a lot of Canadian products are still coming into the US at zero tariffs or whatever were negotiated in NAFTA 2.0. But overall, China has been the only major economy and major power in the world which has pushed back against the US, including imposing at one point close to 120% or more tariffs on the US. Just a few weeks ago, China had come up with this idea of controlling the supply chain of rare earth elements and magnets and determining who gets to buy them, and creating a very complicated process by which they would even evaluate the end user purpose of imports, etc. So the point was that China was essentially trying to not only consolidate and weaponize its dominance in the rare earth elements market, but also use it to perpetuate its dominance, because China not only has control of, shall we say, the mining of rare earth elements, but also controls the processing, which is very critical for these elements, and also owns more or less or produces the technology that is used for processing the rare earth elements. And thereby, by controlling who gets the technology, they can delay other countries which do have reserves of rare earth elements from being able to bring them to the market, thereby prolonging China's dominance and, shall we say, leverage in the global economy, and especially in the global supply chains. But it appears that China and the United States have agreed on an overall framework for a trade agreement which allows China to essentially postpone its export controls for one more year, and also ensure that the United States does not impose the 100% additional tariffs that Donald Trump was threatening from 1st of November. In a couple of days, in fact, day after tomorrow, Xi Jinping and Donald Trump are expected to meet at the APEC conference in South Korea, and they are expected to announce a major deal between the United States and China. And when that happens, obviously, I will be here to explain to you the nuances of that particular agreement. I think it will be one of the most important agreements in recent years with regards to the global economy and global trade. But first, let's talk a little bit about rare earth materials. When we say that China dominates this, what we really mean is that 70% of the global mining of rare earth materials, minerals, especially those that produce magnets, etc., 70% of the mining is controlled by China. 90% of processing and refining is controlled by China. And when you look at those critical magnets, which are absolutely necessary in many new technologies, new and emerging critical technologies, 98% of those magnets are controlled, produced, manufactured, and exported by China. So it clearly has a chokehold on emerging technologies which are used for sustainable development as well as for defense purposes, etc. So right now, if you look at this particular chart, you can say that this is the chart that looks at the production capacities of countries, rare earth elements. This is 2023. The data that I'm giving you, about 69% plus, is for 2024, but this was a pretty graph, so I'm borrowing this. It says that China has 68.6% control of the production. And then you have in the second place, the United States of America. People don't realize that the United States is quite a blessed country, whether it is rare earth elements, whether it is oil and natural gas, whether it is manufacturing. Where the United States is not number one, it is number two. So even though there's so much talk about China's leverage and control on the US with regards to rare earth elements, I was a bit surprised to see this number that the US is the second largest when it comes to 12.3%, followed by Myanmar, which is quite interesting, at 10.9%, and then Australia and Thailand and other countries. So clearly you can see that China is number one, the US is number two, and Australia is in the top four when it comes to production or rare earth elements in terms of mining from the ground. The rare earth elements are not really that rare. They are available in most places. I guess if you went and collected a lot of earth and then you just look through it, you would find it. Apparently, they are very disjointed and separated. So processing them and producing them in a form that they can be used, that's the more difficult part. It requires the technology that at the moment China possesses and produces. And they have invested heavily since the 1990s. So there shows a foresightedness of the Chinese economy and the Chinese government. They recognize very early the importance of rare earth elements and work very hard to monopolize it. This is a global map that basically shows the same thing this is not about production. This is about reserves in millions of tons. So China not only is the biggest producer, but is also has the largest reserves of rare earth elements. And that means that long into the future, China will dominate this because ultimately these elements are going to be part of nearly every technological thing that we will possess in the near future. So China is number one at 44 million tons of reserves. And then number two is Brazil at 21, followed by India, which is number three with 6.9 million tons. Now this map is slightly old, which is 2024, I think. So we don't have Pakistan, which now claims that it has $6 trillion worth of reserves of rare earth minerals, including cobalt, gold, etc. So there are no independent confirmations about the Pakistani claim that it has rare earth elements. But President Trump has signed 8 treaties worldwide, and that is very important to note. So these are the 10 countries which hold 99% of the global rare earth reserves. As you can see, China is number one, Brazil and Vietnam are number 2 and 3. Russia is in the 4th spot with India, etc. So it depends on how you define what are rare earth elements. The positions change of countries, okay? But nevertheless, China has the largest reserves and the US is not far behind. these are the 17 elements from the periodic table. You can see, I'm not going to run through them. These are the 17 elements which are considered as absolutely a rare earth, and they are the ones which are very critical for uh, for various industries. And so if you look at this chart, you can see that so electric vehicles, those are the four critical earth elements that are required. Especially they produce the permanent magnets, which I said 98% of it comes from China. Then they have the wind turbines, and then the defense equipment for jet engines, for missiles, for radars, for lasers, for night vision. All our smartphones, our televisions, LEDs, hard drives, iPads, all of these are also dependent on these rare earth elements and solar panels, batteries, etc. So all technologies that are critical for the future uh, are are dependent on rare earth elements, and they will be more so in the future. So the demand for this is only going to increase. Uh, and so that's an important point to keep in mind. So there is an effort taking place to ensure that people have been, especially Western countries and other powers, have been surprised and worried by what China has done. China's threat to weaponize its supply chain. Look, the West continues to use its economic clout as a weapon. Sanctions are one good example. Now Donald Trump is using tariffs as another way of weaponizing the economic dominance of the United States, the criticality of US economy and market for the rest of the world. So the US has been doing this for decades. And now that China is also basically using the same playbook, has kind of worried most countries, not just in the West, but also in the global South. And so they are looking for diversification of supply chains, et cetera. And that is where what Donald Trump did last week becomes so important, that he has signed 5 new uh, deals with 5 different countries to essentially diversify the supply chain for rare earth elements, not just to mining, but also to production, and you could say refining the rare earth elements. And there is expectations that by 2030, which is in the next 4 years, China's dominance will be reduced to some extent, because it's not just the US which is trying very hard, but clearly you can see the US is way ahead of other countries in trying to become free of China's dominance, but other countries are also taking part in trying to escape the Chinese dominance of rare earth elements. So this is the forecast that by 2030, China's control from 70% will go down to 50 to 55%. In the next 4 to 5 years. So it's not going to become marginal, but it will not have as much clout as it does today. So countries which are not in the good books of China will have an alternative supply chain if China blocks them out. So that is what is expected to happen by 2030 or latest by 2035 for sure. But this is the forecast. So China will go down to 50 to 55%. By 2030, Australia will come up 15 to 20%. US will remain at around 8 to 12%. Canada, Brazil, Vietnam, and in the 7th spot will be India with 2 to 3% of the rare earth elements. So digging them out, processing them, India will have to 2 to 3% of the market share, but China will continue to dominate. And any country like Vietnam and India, which are going to invest heavily in manufacturing, especially in the electronics sector, they will have to depend on Chinese exports of magnets, etc., for at least another 10 to 15 years, if possible, until 2040. So what did Donald Trump do? He spent a lot of time criticizing President Trump on various things, and deservedly so. But I think on this particular issue, he has done an incredible job. So since becoming president, or shall we say since April of this year, Donald Trump has signed 8 critical minerals related treaties with 8 different countries. So in the agreements, what Donald Trump is essentially doing is he's getting first priority for the United States to buy what is produced, or even to jointly excavate and dig mine those rare earth elements, and then basically create an independent supply chain where the US will be either refining it or at least just buying that. So it is quite possible that in another 10, 15 years, if all these deals remain intact, the US might be competing with China in control of rare earth elements. So the first deal was in April 2025 with Ukraine, which establishes joint reconstruction, etc., including rare earth elements like neodymium and dysprosium. I can't even pronounce those names, but there are two of the 17 important elements. The expectations are that there are about 500,000 tons of uranium. There are some fears that some of those mines might be now under Russian control, but once there is a peace process, the US will have access to Ukrainian minerals. This was the first deal that Donald Trump signed. And then after that, he signed one with Pakistan. And that is the second one, which at the moment, I have no information as to how solid the Pakistani claim is that they have millions and trillions in dollars worth of rare earth reserves. But nevertheless, the US is betting on it. So in September, the US basically signed an agreement with Pakistan, and it's investing $500 million, which has already been allocated for basically mining of these rare earth elements from Balochistan. It also includes mining, refining, and also exporting. And it is also tied to the Pakistan's trade deal with the United States, which is quite good because the tariffs that have been imposed on Pakistan are only 19%. It is the second lowest in South Asia after the 10% on Nepal. And then this week, actually, in fact, about a week or so ago, so on October 15th, the US signed a nearly $9 billion deal with Australia. So Australia's reserves are known. In fact, it is a producer of rare earth elements. So the US is investing $1 billion and giving them loans for over $2 billion. So it's a big deal that they are basically trying to acquire existing mines where rare earth elements are. This is going to benefit both Australia as well as the US. And then on October 26th in Kuala Lumpur, Donald Trump signed deals with Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Vietnam is another major player when it comes to reserves as well as production. So signed 4 more deals to essentially consolidate its access to reserves of rare earth elements and also to the finished products that are generated from these countries. And then finally, yesterday, the United States signed an agreement with Japan where they both will invest, I think, in Australia to produce basically magnets for defense purposes alone. Because one thing that China is trying to do is to prevent the export of rare earth elements and magnets, etc., if the end user purpose is defense related. So if you're building missiles and technology, China is going to be very reluctant to give you the license. Even in foreign countries where China is in some way helping with the mining of these rare earth elements there, or Chinese companies are there, they will need China's approval to basically license companies to sell these elements and also technology if they are being used for defense purposes. So this essentially is part of the, you could say, the Quad without India. So US, Japan, and Australia are going to be working together to ensure the supply of these elements purely for defense purposes. And so Donald Trump is also ensuring that the Western world is not blocked by China to these important elements. So it's an interesting development. I don't know whether what China did was smart, whether it played an important card too early in the game, alerting the world to the dangers of Chinese dominance over these elements, and thereby creating a rush to create an alternate global supply chain and reduce China's dominance? We don't know. It is easy to make pronouncements and sign. Like for example, I don't know how many 50,000 years ago that India and the US signed a deal for jet engines. And so there was all this talk that, oh, India is now going to produce fifth generation fighters with America's jet engines. Well, nothing has happened. Years have passed, nearly 5 years, really. So these pronouncements happen all the time, but is there a follow-up? At least in the case of Pakistan, we see that the US has invested $500 million already in Balochistan. And with the Australian deal, I think we can be far more certain that these two things are going to go forward. The other plans are still in the air. Donald Trump was talking about Greenland, primarily because of rare earth elements. Greenland is one of the places where there are huge reserves of these elements. But as you already know, nothing has really happened. So anyway, but nevertheless, you can see that unlike the rest of the world, which is just talking, no agreements have been signed by India or the European Union. The Europeans are talking about this, and they are trying to consolidate the relationship they already have with Canada on access to rare earth elements. Canada is one of the top 5 reserve holders of these elements. So yes, they are talking about it, but not taking as proactive steps as the United States has done in the past. Like in October alone, it has now signed 6 deals with some of the major producers of rare earth elements. So anyway, I wanted to share this with you. This is, I think, a very important topic. This is going to continue to shape geopolitics because increasingly, geoeconomics has become the surrogate arena where geopolitics is conducted. So thank you for watching Conversations. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your socio-political network. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtada Khan. Take care.